Hello, Ethan.
Hello, Itai. How are you?
Good, welcome. Happy to have you here. So first, a disclaimer, I know well your sister,
True.
um, who we work closely in Aleph. So welcome to Growing Pains, and happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Cool. So Ethan Chernofsky, you're now an SVP of Placer AI, 6 years there. You lead the marketing department. And before that, you worked at PR. You came from a very different background, headline media, similar web, which we'll talk a lot about these change. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So I think the first question is if you can share a little bit about this move from being an expert in PR to getting into a company, you need to do a whole lot of other things. Like, how
Yeah.
does it look?
I mean, so I guess the biggest challenge is like getting over the fear of it. Like it's a little scary. Like so you're like, I know how to do this one, narrowish piece of the puzzle. And then now you have to do everything. So that is scary. And I think it did take a beat where you have to think differently about your entry point. So if you're kind of progressing and thinking career wise, it's not just like, oh, I have been this kind of role, a senior role, and therefore I can take over everything right away. I think the flip side though is when I look back on it, there was a few really big advantages. So one advantage was when you work in agency, you get to see lots and lots of things, right? So lots of people have their career where they go from company X to company Y to company Z, and they get to get really, really deep for like three or four companies, and it's amazing. When you work in kind of an agency setting, you don't get very, very deep, but you get to have a very wide perspective. So we got to work with Wix and Lightrix and Lemonade and Next Insurance and like kind of dozens and dozens and dozens of companies, some of whom were very, very successful, as some of whom were far less successful. And I think what was interesting in that it was really like an education into marketing. So, you get to watch like Omer Shai work and, Neil Pochter work and like see how these really brilliant marketing minds approach things and approach things so differently. And then identify your own kind of place within that. So you have this toolkit that when you step into a role, you're like, all right, I'm going to steal this idea that I learned from this person, and I'm going to try to take this concept that I learned from this other person. So there are certainly obstacles and challenges in making that transition, but there's also unique advantages. And I think the final bit is like we have a tendency to overcomplicate things, right? So it's like, you know,
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, especially in the marketing, I mean, especially in tech in general, but in the marketing world, I actually learned this from another kind of Olive portfolio marketer, and she is someone who I really looked up to and admired, and still kind of consult with to this day. She told me once that uh, the idea of the full stack marketer is nonsense. Like nobody knows how to do everything very, very well with their own two hands. Most people know how to do a portion of it very well with their own two hands, a portion of it okay, and a portion of it not at all, but they can manage people who are doing it. And so I think that was also a comforting feeling in the sense that no matter what role I step into, I'm not going to be incredible at doing at the whole thing with my own two hands. And so recognizing that I walk in with a specific skill set and then I have to build around it was a very important starting point.
Definitely. I also think going back to your agency point that when you work at an agency, you kind of have to think about what's the special thing about each company.
Mhm.
Where you work in a company, sometimes you fall in love and you say, okay, we can do influencers and we can do paid and we can do content. And when you work in an agency, you say, okay, this is this company. That's our trick. We're gonna work on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And then it makes you kind of think about it in a colder way.
It's so funny because you said the colder way. I've been thinking about this a lot recently of for those of us who, you think about people who are on the more passionate side of the kind of spectrum, like I certainly put myself there. I think one of the things you learn is how to calm that part down and be very cold in your analysis. And I do think the agency background is incredibly helpful in the sense that you look at companies, you look at these ideas, and everyone walks in because it's their baby, and they're like, "No, you don't understand. We're changing the world, and we're going to be the biggest company ever." And you're like, "No, you're not. Like, you are doing something really interesting, and it's interesting for this specific audience, and it's going to help them, and that might make you a very successful company." But I guess you push back on some of the grandiose, um, extreme concepts just because you've seen a lot more. And I think that's very helpful in terms of when you have to tone down yourself as a company, it's a lot easier to do
For
because you've
sure.
already learned how to build out that process.
Yeah, and I think you can hear sometimes when somebody is doing a storytelling while they're being in love, and not from the
Yeah.
good side of it. You know, from
No, I
being in
totally agree.
love, the blind side. We're the best, we're the most amazing, whatever you need, us.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus this is really good, one, two, three, and that's the reason why it should work for you from a cold, but I'm telling you the real story, the gist of it.
Yeah, honestly, it's funny. We talk about authenticity a lot in the world of marketing of like, how do you have an authentic voice? How do you identify a unique selling point, a unique perspective on the world? And I think what people often forget is having a unique perspective, having a true voice means you know what you're not as much as you know what you are. And so you can say that like, hey, I can't help you with this. I can't do this piece. But I can do this thing really, really well. And that all contributes, but it does start with a certain degree of humility. And I actually think it's one of the things I learned a lot from my current CEO is he doesn't approach this world with like, hey, we're geniuses, we're visionaries, we're going to tell you how everything's going to look. It's very much like we're going to listen to our customers and we're going to try to understand what their pain points are and we're going to take their feedback really seriously. And I think that was a very healthy approach that has, kind of made its way into our marketing as well, in the sense that we don't have all the answers. We do think we do certain things very, very well. We're going to build on those strengths, but we're also going to constantly be aware of the fact that we don't know everything. We don't have all the answers, and we need to be listening to figure out, new solutions, new ideas, new concepts.
Yeah, in the end, we're all just walking in uncertainty, you know.
Yeah, of course.
We're trying to figure it all out, but especially in a startup, you start a company like I love to hear about Placer AI in a second. We haven't
Yeah.
talked about this, and you don't know who you sell to, you don't know who your audience, or you don't even know exactly what you're building, and you need to go out and like figure it all out, and that's a craft of
Yeah, no, totally agree.
growth essentially.
Yeah, it's the gift and the curse of like you're going from, you know, you it's interesting because now I've been here for a while. And so when you first start, you're learning new audiences. Like for us, our core market when we first launched was retail real estate. So people who
So,
like own,
so maybe you can tell a little bit about Placer
yeah,
AI.
yeah, sure, sure. So Placer AI is a location analytics platform. And so people vote with their feet, they vote with kind of their actions. We show you how they move across the United States, how they vote, right? So which retailers do they visit? How long do they spend there? What does their shopping tendencies look like? How are people moving across the country? And then we present that within kind of a research platform that's used by a whole variety of different verticals: retail, real estate, CPG, finance, advertising, civic organizations, and kind of everything in between. Um, I joined about 6, 7 months after the product was launched, and when we launched, we were like really deep in the real estate community. And for me, that was, first of all, brand new. So I didn't know anything. Like these huge names and these huge players that now are like, you kind of, once you see it, you kind of see them everywhere. But like mall owners and shopping center owners and the major brokers, and like you see their logos on buildings all over the place, but you just never paid attention to it
Uh-huh.
before. And so it was this really interesting kind of process of learning this brand new sector that I had never worked in before. And then what's been equally cool is as the company grows, it's not like we just do one vertical. It's like almost every year or so, there's a new vertical or two that you need to learn, or a new component of a vertical that you're already operating within that you need to understand the language and the nuances of. So it's this constant unfolding and this constant newness that I really enjoy. It kind of keeps that ADD side like satisfied because you're always marketing to something different. You're already always taking the product and trying to apply it to a different problem or solve a different problem. And I think that keeps things very exciting. And it kind of keeps you in this ongoing early stage startup mode. Whereas like you have your kind of larger company problems, but you still get to keep that small startup problem, which is, I think it's super important as a marketer because it forces you to stay very embedded within the product and within the discovery process, which I think sometimes we have a tendency to lose because like we already know this, we already understand this audience, and
Mhm.
it's so natural to separate. But once you do that, you lose that finger on the pulse of the industries, on the product, on the changes, on the tweaks, on the nuances that are so important for how you're going to market your product, the problems you might come across, the opportunities that are going to be available too.
That's very interesting. So, like, how do you make sure you're still on it?
You live in the product.
And like, I'll add on this that I think in today's age with AI and whatever I will call it, like the tools, um, clarity is the number one thing. Meaning, it's getting easier, more and more easier to execute, but understanding what we need to do is becoming harder because there's so much noise.
Yeah, I'll steal it from the two people I mentioned at the top. Uh, again, Omer from Wix was a huge influence on me. And Vered Avrahami, who Zichron Levracha, like worked under him for a very long time. They both were like, every day we start our day by looking at new websites that people built on Wix. Every day. Near from Lightrix was like, I sit in user groups and I listen to their feedback on new products every day, new features. I play with the tool myself, like I'm constantly using it. And it was this big influence of like, if I'm ever going to be good at marketing a product, I need to make sure I understand it. I am playing with it. And the joy of Placer is it's like, it's not something that's like, hey, this is only for developers in order to improve their cybersecurity situation. It's something that we want a large variety of people to be using. And so living within the product has been really key to me. Like I refuse to not be in it almost daily. When we have new features, I want to play with them. I want to understand how they're going to be used. I want to be able to go to the product team and say, hey, I don't understand this. Why did you build it for this and not for this other potential solution? And the second you can't, I feel like I can't have that conversation. I know I've lost a step in terms of understanding the product, but it's really, I mean, for those of us who have the benefit of working with something that is oriented towards a wide audience, yeah, you need to use your own product.
Yeah, in opposed to other industries.
Yeah, no, there's some sectors that you can't, but
Yeah.
like there's some sectors that you absolutely can. And even look, let's connect the dot here. When we thought about our marketing for Placer, one of the key elements was uh, we're gonna, put our data where our mouth is, so to speak. Like we're going to tell stories through the lens of our data, and in so doing, be the voice of the product. Like, we marketers, we always have this conversation around like, you know, the branding exercises, like who is your product? Like if they were a person, what would their outfit be or whatever? Like our product is a nerd who likes analyzing the world through the lens of data. And so we need to like live that and really kind of dive deep into the data on a constant basis. And for us, the benefit is like we do happen to get excited by this. Like this is stuff that we find interesting. And so the ability to do that on a day-to-day basis and like really be the voice of the product, I think is a lot of fun.
So that's the reason you have a lot of videos with black shirt on your
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
exactly. But you got to keep it consistent so that you can throw them out there. Otherwise,
How
we
long have you been doing this?
I mean, I actually think it might even have been Erica's idea. Like
Hmm.
shout out to your colleague, my sister. But we had this idea of just having these videos out there. Like we were doing webinars and we were seeing really amazing engagement where people were coming on a consistent basis and like they would kind of we'd go to a conference and someone would come to you and be like, hey, I was watching this webinar and I liked this idea and I hated this idea. And it was amazing to see how connected it was making us with people when they were seeing our faces and like having these conversations that were industry conversations, but they weren't happening together. They were happening like, on a platform. And I think we realized that with social, we should be doing something similar, obviously in a different format, much tighter, much more focused. But really, we started doing these videos. And again, we saw a similar reaction where, all of a sudden you get like messages and like, you're like, hey, I really loved this point. Have you thought about this concept? Or I hated everything you said today. I think it's totally stupid, which is amazing. And so it just gave us this other opportunity to have this asynchronous interaction with our audience.
How much of the impact um, do you think you can measure versus how much you feel because you're the character, so you obviously get feedback in various like areas.
I mean, it's the it's the classic attribution problem, right? Of marketing attribution. We all know the truth. It is at best kind of right. It's licking your finger and figuring out which way the wind's blowing. It is not an accurate measure of things. And it was interesting. There was one person who, you know, I met at a conference, stopped by our booth, and was like, we had an hour-long conversation about a video that they had consumed on LinkedIn. A week later, only a week later, we connected on LinkedIn. So he was seeing it through our like company channel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you looked at that person, the person ended up becoming a customer. If you ended up looking at that person's lead source, it was like an event from like a year and a half prior. So like, does it show all the things? Of course not. And so I think you want to have a variety of channels. You want to have things that you know are, hey, I can peg back in a really accurate way the dollars that I generated from this. You're going to have some channels that are a little bit more difficult to measure, but you're going to use anecdotal evidence. You're going to use these other sources to try and frame it and understand what its potential impact is. And I think the last bit of it is you want to be smart about how you spend your dollars based off of that. So if doing LinkedIn videos cost me as much as doing like major events and I couldn't attribute it back, we wouldn't be doing them.
Yeah.
But because it's a fairly easy channel to utilize and to leverage, there's no harm in doing it because the cost is not so significant that it would make it, it would take away from something else.
Yeah, I think also that you know, the whole like digital area, it's been around like only for 15 years. And
Yeah.
once we were able to measure things, we became addicted to proving that it's working. And there were companies that were long ago before us, you work with a lot of them, that that are doing brand, TV, billboards, the whole deal. It's been working, and there's a reason if you create engagement with somebody, it eventually becomes like better for business. It's
Yeah.
not like this, but it's working. And
Yeah.
performance has driven us all to kind of do a lot of very impulse decisions that sometimes are not. Uh,
Yeah, but I think the pendulum always swings. So it goes from like, I mean, there was a period where when I was starting my career, it was like all performance. I even heard from one very well-known CEO who said, the marketer of the future, and he was saying this in like the 2010, 2011, that the market of the future is a developer, right? And then you watched as like all those that hardcore performance shift swung pretty far back towards like PR and communications and brand and all these things. And it's, now things like AI are swinging it back a little bit more. And it's always somewhere in between. I think what's interesting though is we have this tendency to obsess over the first part of a wave and not look at, well, if a wave is coming, what are the logical things that will come with it? So
mhm.
performance is a great example. Performance is amazing, right? Performance marketing is incredible, huge channel, super exciting, super impactful for a lot of businesses. That is their core of their being, right? In terms of a marketing perspective, especially early. But if everyone does that, all of a sudden that cheaper cost of acquiring a lead starts to be not so cheap anymore, and it starts to
Mhm.
be flooded with lots of things that aren't so good, and people get turned off by that, and all of a sudden it's not as effective of a channel. And so I think we have this tendency to look at just the early stages of something and say like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is going to change everything. And it's like, well, actually, it's going to be diluted in value because other people are going to start doing it too, and you're going to have the same degrees of competition there that you would have in a traditional channel, so to speak. And so I think it's constantly on. It's as marketers, we almost need to differentiate between the way we view our voice, our approach, and the channels that we use to get our voice and our approach or our message to our core audiences. So performance marketing, by the way, and even all the channels within performance marketing are channels. They're not and sometimes we confuse the channel for like the message, and the message needs to be the core. The channel is what we adapt the message to in order to maximize that channel's efficiency. So it's like a plane will get me somewhere, a car will get me somewhere, a boat will get me somewhere. and I should have different appreciations or different processes for how I maximize travel on a plane, a boat, a car. But that doesn't mean that the process of getting from point A to point B is still the most important thing. And the when I'm going to use the plane, the car, the boat is just going to change based off of the cost, the need, what that specific process is for.
Yeah, I also think that with the changes that AI is bringing us, it's going to be easier to do everything on the minimum level. Like
Agree.
the simplify to run an ad, to launch an SE, like a blog, to create a video. And the most important thing would be to understand the user and be good at the storytelling and the way like the way you interact like with your specific audience.
Mhm.
And if you understand this, you can leverage AI. But if you're just gonna try and do things, I think the hardest thing for like with marketing is that it's easy. And a lot of people fall for we've done this and that.
Yeah.
We created yeah, we have Facebook. We're doing Facebook.
Yeah.
We're doing performance. We're doing A/B testing. Of course, we're doing A/B testing.
Yeah.
We all do it. Like, I haven't met a company that doesn't do A/B testing, and then when you flip, you're like, yes, but no. It's the tricky part is that it's so simple but it's really hard to really understand and really crack these things.
I forget who used this terminology first, but it was a colleague of mine, and he called people ink marketers, like ink.com, like the publisher. And he was like, there's always these articles of like 6 things you need for a great
Yeah,
marketing strategy. He's like, SEO, paid acquisition. Well, and it's like, there's a lot of marketers who that's where they leave it. They're like, are we doing paid acquisition? Yes, I'm doing my job well. Do we have an SEO strategy? Check. Amazing. But it's the levels beneath that really matter. All right, well, what do we actually expect to get out of our SEO strategy? How are we optimizing it? Are we actually going to reduce our focus on it because we don't think in our space it brings that much value? It's the micro conversations that I think matter so much more. And
mm-hmm.
those are harder because every, every company, most companies are very, very different. Like I had a recruiter reach out to me once, and she was like, I have this amazing company for you. They're You're perfect for them. And it was this B2C company. Now, thankfully very happy where I am, not really looking, but I was like, I kind of had to respond. I was like, I would be horrible at this job. I was like, you shouldn't hire me at all. Like, I have none of the skills that you need for this. And she was like, why? And we actually got on a call, and I was like, in a B2C company, for the most part, that has like a low, margin product and it's like looking to scale, you need someone whose core skill set early on is paid acquisition because you need to get those initial users and you need to figure out how to scale that machine. Brand, it's not that it's not important, but like
It's
content
not
and
gonna
that
be the
skill
zero
set
to one.
are
It's gonna be
not
the
are
one to
not the
10. Yeah.
first thing you need. I was like, you shouldn't be talking to people like me. You should need to be talking to people who have this skill set first and then add on the people who can do these other pieces afterwards. And even that, it's like a perspective. But I think this idea that, this again, that full stack, I'm a full stack marketer. I can market anything. I'm like, I don't know, maybe there are some geniuses out there who can. I can't. Like, I don't know how to do it. I know how to build something very powerful for a certain type of company.
Mhm.
And my skill set does not apply to others. And I think it's apropos the first question you asked, we're all kind of puzzle pieces, right? And like there's this wider marketing puzzle, company puzzle, etc. And I think the earlier we come to terms with my puzzle piece covers this area but does not cover this area, the more effective we're going to be.
I think that a company is a puzzle piece as well, meaning at a certain point, you need to do not six, you need to do one or two things very well and very fit for your audience. If you figure those out, these will take you from 1 to 10 million. Then you need to figure another one to take you
Mhm.
from 10 to 30.
Yes.
But in the beginning, it's a lot more about what I'm not doing and
Yes.
where I'm focusing my energy because that's the hardest thing. And like I saw people doing SEO for things that nobody's searching, and
Yeah.
I saw everything. And it's just really understanding that I need to find this one place that I'm reaching my audience that he sees and interacts with me and wants to hear about me,
Yeah.
and then I just hammer on it.
Yeah, but it's also it's this okay, so you're in that situation. You found the channel that's working for you. You're getting the leads you need. Are you investing in the next year? Because this year I need to get from 1 to 5. And I found a channel that is driving the results. We're sitting there. Imagine we're sitting here in March and it's like, it's working. I have a lot of confidence. We're going to do all the things we need to do. I better be taking part of my budget and asking like, is this enough for me to get to where I need to get to next year too? Because I think so much of marketing is finding that core, but then making sure you're constantly investing in how do I identify the secondary strategy, that tertiary strategy? Because if I don't invest in it now, I'm going to end up in a situation where my core starts being saturated, stops bringing me the same degree of efficiency that I was getting before, and I better have something else to bring to the mix. So it is this it's this difficult editing game where on the one hand I want to focus on the things that I need to do the bulk of my time, but I do want to make sure I'm investing at least part of my focus time attention on things that might only bring me value in a year or 2 years from now. And I think that balance is very challenging, but it's one of the things that I think as marketing leaders we need to focus a lot of our attention on.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, I want to hear a little bit about you've done a lot of a lot of outbound in the company. Um, we can talk about what worked and what not worked. But I'm more interested about how do you see these things now? Because it's changing rapidly, and like this area, like I think there is kind of like a the word in the street that it's all going to get automated and we'll just
Yeah,
have like magical like agents who will just like bring leads to our door front,
yeah,
which I don't agree.
yeah,
But
I
like, how
agree.
do you look at this?
I mean, I parked my car in a similar garage. Like I have brilliant colleagues on the SDR side on our at Placer, and I learned a lot from them. And I think one of the things that was really, I think there's a few principles that to me would probably widely applicable. One is the the absolute necessity that your inbound and outbound efforts are harmonious, right? Like they need to be working together. So your outbound focus on your inbound leads, you're using your inbound leads to drive where there might be new focus. Like that interaction is super important. And that's one strategically, like how you actually build your system, but also two, the level of interaction. Because I think sometimes these things get siloed of like we have our inbound and we have our outbound, or we have our brand and we have our paid. Like these things need to be in lockstep for them to maximize their output. But I agree with you. I think we have when things get easier to do technically, everyone does them and everyone does them at scale, which means to stand out, it's more difficult because everyone's doing it. It's like the first person to do a podcast was like, hey, listen, look, it's a little bit easier to get audience because they're the only one with a podcast. Everybody on planet Earth has like 4 podcasts now, so it's much more difficult to get attention using a podcast, right? And so it's the same thing. It's where you are on that marketing curve is going to have a big impact. And I think interestingly, the pendulum has this tendency to swing back to basics. So it's like, we make jokes about telemarketers when like I was a kid, like that was people annoying you during dinner. That process is still part of it. Can you have an interacting, positive interaction? Do you know how to have something that's relevant? Do you know how to talk to someone? These kind of basic skills that are, you know, not AI driven are going to be utilized more heavily as everyone has access to these skills that bring down the barrier to having volume.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned like how do you sync between channels, and we can't avoid not talking about ABM and this
Yeah, yeah,
shenanigans. But
yeah,
like I told you a little bit about my
yeah.
when I joined the B2B world was like so essentially ABM, we're just targeting these bunch of companies and we need to combine to get sales and marketing speak together.
How
That's the
dare
simple
you?
part.
How
But
dare you say that about ABM, the godlike process that it is? And no, it's silliness. It's again, at its core, it's a really interesting idea, right? don't talk to everyone, talk to the specific entity, talk to the specific vertical, talk to the specific role within the specific entity. Like, amazing. Like, I think we would all agree that that's really good. The execution of it is very different from place to place. So in some places, it's like, hey, I'm going to do my paid acquisition strategies so that when a certain vertical sees my content, they see it about their company and about something that's relevant to their company and about something that's relevant to their role. Great. We all want to do that. It's targeting, right? That's audience targeting. That's nothing new. Advertisers and marketers have been doing this since the beginning of advertising and marketing, right? There's channels that allow us to do it more in a more refined way right now, but it's not something that's like brand new in any way, shape, or form. I also think one of the things that's interesting is where people draw the boundaries of it. They're like, oh, I don't do a PR, so to speak. I do ABM. It's like, well, PR can be part of your ABM strategy. It's just you need to talk about this type of company and this type of thing that's relevant. Unless here, you talk about this issue that's relevant to this company, and then you bring that to your SDR and you say, hey, this is a great thing for you to bring to this person that you're in charge of targeting from that outbound perspective, taking this kind of brand ABM approach and then applying it to your outbound. And so I think it goes back to what we were saying before of like, there is the surface level view of what ABM is. And if you apply it with only that surface level view, you're probably not going to have a lot of success, or you might have one short-term success, but you're not going to be able to build a robust strategy over time. When you start breaking these things down into their component parts and asking how do we fit it within our system and how do we maximize it by leveraging the same perspective across the board, or utilizing this alongside something else that might not seem like it's the perfect fit, that's where I think you get more exciting results.
Yeah. And like on a more practical level, how did you like what worked for you in terms of getting the different departments to talk? Like, is there anything different? Who reports to who? Because it's crazy how different departments. We're all in the same company. We all want the
Yeah.
company to sell eventually, but it's like just don't talk together.
Yeah,
Like, how
yeah.
did it work for you?
I mean, I got very lucky in across the board where there was a real sense of like, first of all, I've been there for a long time. So as people joined, you kind of, you act the way you want others to act. So ensuring that there's this element of service. You can have the best marketing team on planet Earth, but if in a B2B setting, if your sales team isn't good or your CS team isn't good, okay, you're not going to succeed as a company. And I think the most important thing is just looking in the mirror and be like, I can't do this alone. I really would like to succeed. That would be really nice for me personally, for the company. Those things are aligned. So I better have this mentality of I'm here to serve. And I think it's, one of the places that's interesting is I was once asked in an interview process, how do you maintain a strong relationship with sales? Because we'd had, I've thankfully in my career had the benefit of working with amazing sales leaders and salespeople and having strong relationships. And I said, it's like recognizing that I don't succeed if they don't succeed. Like if you're playing point guard and your job is to have assists, you better have someone who you're giving the ball to who can score, and you better put them in the ideal position for them to score. And so I think it really is, do you create a mentality and a culture of we're here for each other, we have the same goal, and we are going to do things for the sake of that goal. Like I'm going to work my butt off so you can succeed because I know if you succeed, I succeed. I don't. It's not that complicated. It's a very simple. It's like again, that ink marketer. Like it's a very simple thing. Like have a good relationship.
That's the
But
problem.
as with anything, it
Yeah.
takes work. It takes sacrifice. It takes, you know, are you doing extra for them? And I think when you do those things over time, like you talked about the relationship with SDR, like are you talking on a regular basis? Are you asking about what the problems are? Are you trying to figure out ways you can help? Just these little things can go a long way in building a relationship that drives ongoing success.
How often do you talk with the sales leader?
I mean, minimum once a week, but regularly. Like it's fairly constant. And when there's an issue, it's all the time. Like it's like when we've identified a problem that we think we can solve together, then it's, as often as needed until you solve the problem. Um, but yeah, it definitely comes and goes in waves because in some cases, the biggest problem for me to solve is with one leader. In another case, it's somewhere else. And so, it's been the same for them. Like they have bigger fish to fry at the moment. And so you're just constantly trying to recognize that you are a role on a wider team. It's not just about you.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. We're getting close to finish. Anything else you'd like to add?
Anything else? Like a what? You got to give me some direction.
The banal question is about AI, or like how does it look in a few years,
Yeah.
or anything around that, whatever.
I
Maybe I'll
do.
take it to
Yeah, go ahead.
what do you think the one thing in the company's culture that makes you different?
Um, I'll say start with AI and I'll end on the culture. And the AI thing, I think from a marketing perspective, we need to be wary of two things. The first is everything has changed forever immediately, and we're never going to do anything the way we ever did it before again, and the whole world is different completely right now. That's not true. But the problem is the easy reaction to that is this whole thing is nonsense, which is also not true. AI is changing things. It is improving the way we can access. It's improving our speed to market. It's improving a lot of things within the marketing toolkit perspective that are going to make our jobs better, more effective, and are going to becomes table stakes for how we operate. So you have to find that balance between learning the new tools, learning the new skills, ensuring your team is learning the new skills and the new tools, while at the same time not overreacting. And that's always it's the tricky place is the in between, but that's where we need to try and live. Because it is going to have a very significant impact, even if that impact isn't the world was one way and now it is nothing like what it was before at all. It's completely different, right? It's the opposite of it. In terms of culture, I go back to I think there's two things that I love about Placer. And one is, I said before, the humility, the sense that we don't have all the answers. You need to listen. You need to talk to people. You want their feedback. And not, I want you to give your feedback so I can be like, look how much feedback I'm getting. But like their feedback should be really heavily weighed. You should listen, you should ask them questions because you want to hear their responses, not because you want to check the box that I asked you a question.
Hmm.
And I think too, there's a real appreciation for grit. Like I think it's there in the beginning of an early stage startup. Like you have to just figure out how to get stuff done because you don't have enough people and you don't have enough resources. But when you're larger, it's really easy to lose some of that and get a little too fancy and a little too, well, I don't know if I should be doing this. And like, I really appreciate the fact that everyone in this company at all levels is still in the weeds. Like there's an appreciation for being in the weeds and the value that that brings you and getting your hands dirty and the perspectives that can show you. I have a deep appreciation for that and just like the tactlessness, which is not a word, but I think we just created it, that it creates within an organization.
That's awesome. It's been super interesting, Ethan. Thank you
I
very
thank you.
much.
It was a lot of fun having the conversation.
Nice. Thank you.